the core of the game, the essential goal, the still ball and the still player over it, getting an idea in his head of what he wants to try to do with it, and then taking that idea and turning into a physical act has not changed at all.
I'm Mason Reed, and this is Invested in the Game, an original podcast from Charles Schwab. Each episode, we tell the story of remarkable people who have committed their time, resources, and emotional energy into making golf the wonderful and sometimes maddening game that it is. Hello, Invested in the Game listeners. On today's episode, we're talking with writer and journalist Michael Bamberger. When we started this podcast a few seasons ago, I knew we'd have Michael on at some point, not just because he's one of the most famous and acclaimed writers in golf, but also because I have the privilege of calling him a friend. We met a few years ago and hit it off immediately. I was really attracted to his unique view of life and golf. He seems to be invested in the stories, souls, and traditions within golf that make it such a fascinating hobby and sport. This has played out in a long and distinguished career in journalism, from humble beginnings at the local paper in Martha's Vineyard to 2 decades at Sports Illustrated and now at Golf Magazine and Golf.com. Along the way, he's also written many books that also use the hybrid journalism meets storytelling approach he's become known for. We caught up with Michael while he was in England covering the 2026 Open, also known to some as the British Open. We discussed that tournament, along with unpacking his nearly 5 decades of writing and his time around the game of golf. I also couldn't help myself asking about his longtime coverage of Tiger Woods. I hope you enjoy the conversation with Michael. I think he's as interesting of a character as anyone he's written about, and I hope you'll get a small sense of that from our chat. Michael Bamberger, good to see you and welcome to Invested in the Game. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Mason. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you. And before we jump in, I have a lot of questions. I have more questions than we're going to have time for today to ask you about. But before we jump in, we have to level set. Normally I'm at podcast headquarters in Austin, Texas. I'm out in California. You are in Southport, England, because the Open is happening as we record this at Royal Birkdale. Is this an assignment, or are you there personally, or some combination of both? How are you taking in the Open this week?
It's a well-framed question because for me, it's always personal. Like my whole reporting life is personal. But I'm here because golf.com has sent me here. And for many years before that, Sports Illustrated sent me here. I came to one British Open as a caddie, and that was in 1985. So I've come to a lot of Opens over the years, and I'm here. I know this will be after the fact by the time this gets out to the free world, but I'm here as a reporter covering the Open Championship.
You know, we don't typically do, in the moment current events, but I'd be remiss not to ask you 1 or 2 questions about the Open, and then we'll move on to regularly scheduled programming. What are you interested in this week? Or what's a story that's of interest to you as you take in the Open?
Well, the first and great thing about my day today was that the golfer that I most admired as a kid in the 70s, Tom Watson, is here this week. And I was lucky enough to get a one-on-one interview with him. And I could talk about things like the 1975 British Open at Carnoustie, which was the first one where I really fell into this whole idea of links golf, and talk about him in a very personal way. And here was Watson talking about Byron Nelson and the tips he got from Byron Nelson. And Byron Nelson, in the 30s, would have known golfers from the early part of the 20th century. Now, this championship, golf's oldest, has only been around for 154 years, but within those 3 people, me talking to Watson and Watson talking to Nelson and whomever Nelson knew, that would be almost the whole history of Open Championship golf. So one of the great things about being at the Open here is how it hands down the game from one generation to the next. And I think golf does that beautifully. Baseball, I think, does it beautifully, and I think golf does it even better.
Just to build on that, if you don't mind, is there a player or a couple players that you think are playing today professionally that will be that next generation that will come back and link these stories together? Anybody that you've seen that has some of those characteristics?
That's a terrific question. I have a very specific answer, and it won't surprise you. It's your fellow Texan Jordan Spieth. He won majors at a very young age, 22, 23 years old. He's only in his early 30s now, He's deeply rooted in the game and the game's history and the game's, people get turned off by the word history. I don't know why. History is storytelling. And Jordan is interested in the story of golf. How he got there is on the backs of what Watson did and what Nicklaus did and what Hogan did. And going back, I'm just giving you American golfers and literally going back to young Tom and old Tom. So I think Jordan has a deep appreciation for that. He's the first person that comes to mind as someone who'll carry it down to the next generation. But just along those same lines, Gene Sarazen, who won the second Masters, he was still at dinner when Tiger won in 97. So Tiger hosted the Masters dinner in 98. Gene Sarazen was at that dinner. So how cool is that? I was talking to Watson today, and Watson shares a locker at Augusta National with Claude Harmon. He knew Claude Harmon. How cool is that? For your listeners who don't know, everybody probably knows, if they follow golf closely, would know the name Butch Harmon, who was Tiger's teacher for years. But Butch Harmon's father was a club pro at Winged Foot who won the Masters. And like for people, younger Mason than even you would be like, what? A club pro won the Masters? Yeah, a club pro won the Masters. This guy had two jobs. He was the head pro at Seminole and he's the head pro at Winged Foot. And basically, he was driving from his winter job at Seminole to his summer job at Winged Foot, stops over at Augusta, plays the tournament, wins, and drives on to Winged Foot for a summer job. I don't know how I know that story, but I picked it up along the way, and I'm glad to have the chance to share it with you and whomever may be listening.
I love that. And you're touching on a couple of things I'm going to ask you about in just a few minutes around which traditions we pull forward in the game of golf and storytelling as it relates to your career and to just this new digital world. We're going to get to that in just a second. But now I'll go to the regularly scheduled programming. What was your first introduction to golf? What was it? Was that caddying at a young age or some other connection point?
I'm really glad you asked me that question. I ask that question of almost everybody I meet in golf. But the reason I'm particularly glad you asked me that question is because when I give the answer, I would like to send it to the grand minds at the USGA and have them do something with it. My family had no background in golf whatsoever. My mom and dad left Nazi Germany as kids. When they were growing up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, golf was not a thing. Hogan was not a thing to them. They knew nothing about it. They might have known a little something about the New York Yankees and the New York Giants. The New York Mets didn't even exist. The Brooklyn Dodgers did. Anyway, not a golf family at all. My 8th grade gym teacher at a public middle-class middle school in our town, Patchogue, New York, decided to introduce kids to golf in gym class. You got to get introduced to the game to see if you've got the gene pool, the DNA, to fall into the game's web. And why there isn't more of that in public schools, I don't know, because gym is still taught very widely in American schools. And it's not hard to get clubs into a gym and give kids, this is what we had, plastic mats and wiffle balls and, hit balls at backboards. And I don't know, I got bit by the bug almost immediately. So there are a lot of different paths to the game. And I know there's a lot of time and effort being made. I'm trying to figure out ways to get kids introduced to golf. But I think the gym class in public schools across the United States, just to limit it to our country, is undervalued and underappreciated. Underused is really what I'm trying to say.
Did you like or love golf immediately, or did that grow over time? Or I don't know. I shouldn't assume. Do you love golf? I think you love golf. But when did you start to get like an emotional connection to it?
It really is both, because I can still to this day remember the feeling of what it was like to be in that gym class. And I don't know if this is true or not, but I know we would try to hit the backboard or, try to hit a wedge through the hoop or something. I imagine I hit the backboard. I doubt I ever got hit one through the hoop, but I was already taken with it. And that was in probably the spring of 74. And that spring and summer I started playing. And, not long after that, could break 100 and break 90 and occasionally break 80. So that's in the mid 70s. The golfers who are on TV then, or when I got to see live tournaments a little later, Arnold was still playing. Big Jack was at the height of his powers. Tom Watson was the kid coming on. So Lee Trevino, John Mahaffey, Hubert Green, Tom Weiskopf, Billy Casper. I mean, I was lucky to catch the game when I did. And then, as you indicated, started caddy a little bit in professional tournaments and got to know a lot of my heroes as well. So I've been able to come at the game, a lot of different ways as a caddy, as a, ordinary duffer, and as a reporter with, ridiculously lucky access to some of the great figures in the game, famous and not.
I'm going to probably skip over a bunch of things, but bringing up a little bit of your access through your journalism career. Was the Vineyard Gazette your first journalism job?
Yeah, first after college was the Vineyard Gazette, weekly newspaper in Martha's Vineyard. I was covering Hatfields and McCoys, if that reference is meaningful to you at all. Okay, so you had a lot of feuding families on Martha's Vineyard over land claim and this and that, and who had access to the beach. And I lived on you ever been to Martha's Vineyard, Mason?
I haven't, actually.
It's an island, for those who don't know, off the southeast coast of Massachusetts. And my neighbor on one side was Bart Giamatti, who was the president of Yale at the time. And my neighbor on the other side was John Farrar, who pulled Mary Jo Kopechne's body out of Ted Kennedy's Oldsmobile in 1968. So just meeting a lot of really interesting people. In that same period, I started writing a series, not intentionally, of just like really old people on the vineyard and their stories. And it would seem like I would write them up and then they would die. But like at age 100. And so Bart Giamatti started calling me poet of the passé. And, his bit was like, hey, if Bamberger calls you to write you up, say no.
Don't do it. Yeah. It's like the Grim Reaper showing up to write a story on you.
Yeah. Get off my property, not my backyard. So just really, really a great, great place to start a life as a reporter.
That's so interesting thinking, most people that know you or I think or have followed you probably associate you with, I'm assuming, with books and with your time at SI and some of these other things. And it's so interesting to unpack it a little bit and go back to storytelling about people and other fascinating characters on Martha's Vineyard.
I appreciate that note that you just made very much, because to be lucky enough to have had the writing life I've had, you need a start. And I was lucky to have this as a first job, and then later at the Philadelphia Inquirer and then Sports Illustrated. And just for any young reporters who might be listening, I hope that they'll think about their own paths in this very difficult and very great business of ours of trying to write about life as it is, because I think there really are steps along the way of learning the craft. I mean, I think you're always sort of an apprentice in the game of writing and reporting. But anyway, so just for that reason, I'm delighted you gave me the chance to talk about the Vineyard Gazette.
No, of course. It's fascinating to get to some of the foundational steps in your career. I mentioned Sports Illustrated. You mentioned it as well, and you were there for a very long time. But as it relates to golf, you were there for, a huge, huge portion of Tiger's arrival and his rise, and I think probably even the fall, and then probably the beginnings of another. A lot of the journey. What was it like being at Sports Illustrated and being on the side of the table of journalism, watching Tiger's arrival and ascension in the game? What was it like from your side of the desk as a journalist?
Incredible. So Tiger, as most of your listeners would know, he's won 15 majors. I've covered 14 of them. He won 3 AMs. I covered one of them. And he was 19 when I first started covering him. I think he's 50 now. So that's a long time. And SI's approach to covering everything in those days is we are a news organization. We are not in the business of cozying up to players so they like us, so we'll write something nice about them. We're in the business of telling our readers what the athlete is actually like. So I found that to be very challenging with Tiger Woods because he's almost impossible to get to know. I've written literally 1 million words about Tiger Woods. And if at a cocktail party, this is my most dreaded question at a cocktail party. What's Tiger Woods really like? Well, after writing 1 million words about him, I don't know. I wrote one book called The Second Life of Tiger Woods. Well, that was dated in about a year. He was on to his third life. It was maybe his fourth life by this point. It's hard to know where the demarcations are. It was been a great joy to cover Tiger Woods in his prime, and also very frustrating because he was so closed off. And his management team, which in ways I have a grudging great respect for, Mark Steinberg, if you could ever get him on on your show would be a great guest to have. And I'm interpreting here. My feeling is that Steinberg's feeling was, I mean, this is with a lot of consideration as I'm saying this, you're either on Tiger's team or you're off Tiger's team. Well, I'm definitely not, as a reporter covering it, cannot be on his. So if those are the only options, well, then I'm off the team. Now, they would say this is not true, maybe, I don't know. I'm in the business of covering Tiger Woods for people like Mason who want to know what he's, quote, really like or what he actually did. And that was a thrill. I mean, covering one of the greatest athletes of all time in his prime at the closest range imaginable. And then when weird things happen, and there was a lot of weird things, we don't need to get all that, people follow the game real closely. Well, cover that with the same closeness because of the basic idea of what SI stood for. What is the guy really like?
Were there repercussions of that? I mean, I guess it's kind of tracks with a much longer discussion about whether people trust in the objectivity of journalism of this, like even the concept of you're either on our team or not team has nothing to do with journalism. Did that either have repercussions? Like did you get marginalized at different moments from being able to do your job because of trying to tell accurate stories, the news to people?
You're good at this, Mason. So I would say, this is such a credit to Tiger, and I love to have the chance to say this. I don't think Tiger liked me or disliked me. I was just another guy in the crowd. But if I asked Tiger a question in a group press conference, if he liked the question, he gave you a warm, thoughtful answer. Maybe not the incisive, intelligent answer. That would really be more accurate. And if he didn't, he was never rude. He just sort of moved on to the next thing. He'd be like, yeah, I don't want to get into it. So people were critical of how sort of cold he was in his dealings with the press. I don't really take that view. I think he was very professional. I think he showed up for hundreds and hundreds of these little press conferences, and he made himself available, and you could ask whatever you wanted to ask, and he answered or didn't answer as he felt what was appropriate. One year at the Open at St. Andrews, there had been a terrible terrorist attack in London, and his mom had been in London. I don't think I would have known that. And there was a moment of silence for the victims of this terrorist attack. I said, Tyra, I hope this question is not too personal, but I could see that you were super focused in that moment of silent meditation. If you don't mind me asking, what were you thinking about? He said, yeah, my mom was in London while it was going on. I was thinking how lucky I was that she's okay. And my heart goes out to those who aren't okay. So, there's a lot of different sides about Tiger and a lot of different sides to covering Tiger. And I just, anyone who's listening to this, I would like people to know that he didn't have a personality type where he could give of himself like Rory can. He's the opposite. But people come in all shapes and sizes in this world, and it'd be a boring place if they didn't. And that was Tiger's personality type. It was my job to try to sort through it all.
Yeah, it's not your job to change him. It's just your job to do your best to represent what you think he is or what he's saying into the world. It makes total sense. Moving on from that, you've written, I think, almost 10 books, so 8 books. What's the difference between writing a book and writing a long profile or a story for a magazine? And I know that part of the obvious answer is length, but beyond that, just from how you approach it, how you think about it, how would you articulate the difference between the process and how you approach a book versus a story?
I think the notion of a book is a shelf life of you hope forever. You hope what you can commit. I just wrote a story about Bobby McIntyre, the left-handed golfer from Scotland, in his first round, 3 under par, 67. That story will have a shelf life, if I'm lucky, of 3.5 hours, and I know it. But it's an important 3.5 hours for people who are following this British Open. When you're running for Sports Illustrated, it's going to have, you hope, a longer shelf life. And for a book, you really want to be saying something that will stand. I hope my goal would be to stand the test of time. So I would say that the single biggest difference is that you hope it'll have a life. And what that requires is, if you're writing nonfiction, maybe even more if you're writing fiction, you can't know enough. You can't go back to the source enough. You can't go deep enough on the subject. There's never enough because the human condition is so endlessly complex and interesting. And there's always a deeper reason for why we do, all of us, why we do what we do. I wrote a book years ago called Wonderland. It's about this kid named Bob Costa, and he's a junior or senior at his middle-class high school. And he obsessively tried to get John Mayer to come and play his prom. And he did eventually. And so over and over and over again, I'm asking myself, what is it with this kid? Why was it so important to him to try to get John Mayer to play his prom? And one of the things, I didn't know this phrase at the time, but a lot of people know the phrase that reporters find very useful, follow the money. Why does someone do what they do? Follow the money. It comes from the Watergate movie, All the President's Men. But there's a corollary to that, which is, it's not catchy like that, but it's a very interesting idea. It comes from Tom Wolfe, and it is the following. What will people do to achieve higher status within their peer group? I know it's a mouthful, but I've sorted through that and I use it a lot. And if you can sort through those questions and get at something, character will often reveal itself.
How does storytelling exist broadly? I mean, the human condition is built on storytelling from tens of thousands of years ago. How does storytelling exist in a world of these dopamine hit tweets and quick, you just mentioned that your Bobby McIntyre story has 3.5 hours. That sounds like a long time these days. So I'd love your perspective on the status and not the future. I don't know if you have a crystal ball, but just the role of storytelling, the importance of storytelling, or how it even exists today in a world of short-term, quick takes.
So I think you're right. Storytelling is at the core of human experience because we're always trying to learn from our predecessors and hand things down to the next generation. And that dopamine hit of the tweet and the Instagram and all the rest, I have willfully divorced myself from it because it's meaningless to me. And I'm not dissing it for those for whom it is meaningful, but I will say from the little I can pick up on it, it is cotton candy and it has very little nutrition and it will not really enrich you, I don't think, at the end of the day. So this is not a good answer, but for my thing, I'm 66, knock on wood. I can keep doing this for 20 or more years. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing in part because it's the only thing I know how to do, but in part because it's the thing I really love. And in part because it's the thing that has stood up over time through thousands of years and that I think has true and great value.
I hope that people over time realize the cotton candy nature and maybe realize it might not be as fulfilling as they think it is and get back to more engaging activities that are personal to them, that's spending time with people they like or, engaging in stories. I don't know. Time will tell. So you've been around golf for, you just said you're 66. You've been around golf for more than 5 decades in different capacities. How do you feel personally about golf? Now, we've talked a lot about your career and journalism and writing books. How do you feel about it personally, about the game and its role in your life?
I have this very romantic notion of the professional golfer as this sort of vagabond figure who would go anywhere to play golf for money. And I'm not dismissing the for money part of it. That's huge because that's what allows you to keep going. Now this is not a politically correct term anymore, but I got it from Ray Floyd. And I think people forgive Ray and me for using it. We were gypsies. That was a phrase that Ray Floyd, for those who don't know Ray Floyd's a Hall of Fame golfer, won the U.S. Open, won the Masters, won PGA Championship, and was one of the best of the game in this golden era that I spoke of earlier. I should have listed his name. We were gypsies. We were traveling the country and to some degree the world because we loved this game so much. And I grew up on that notion, which maybe couldn't be 100% true, but could be largely true. My friend Faye Vinson wrote a book about baseball. He's the former baseball commissioner, wrote a book called We Would Have Played for Free. Is it literally true? No. Is it a feeling? Yes. The rise of LIV was a huge turnoff for me because you saw some of these elite golfers as just sort of money-grubbing people like millions of people are. And I thought golf was better than that. So I would say these last 5-6 years have challenged my notion and my attachment to professional golf. But, and it's a very significant, but, and Mason, you and I have had the pleasure to, play this game together, and you played at a very high level and I don't. And I think that distinguishing factor is almost meaningless in terms of the challenges that the game presents to us and the joys that we get from the game. And that part in my mid-60s hasn't changed at all. And if anything, my intense feeling for trying to play better golf, or the joy I get from particularly good golf when it happens, has increased. And part of the recipe for happiness in that very narrow regard is match play. Match play, which of course is what all Scots play, is the perfect form of golf, because if you make an X or you make a 7 or your 7 beats an 8, whatever, you're moving out of the next hole and you're starting fresh. And so much of golf and so much of life is having a fresh start. So I know it makes you got a long ways to go, but when you're 66, you may say, oh yeah, I know what Bamberger's talking about, match play, that's where it's at. Because typically, if the guy says, oh, I shot 77 today, if you really went into it, it's not 77. But if the guy says I won 2 and 1, or, I closed him out on 14, whatever it might be, that is almost always completely true.
Yeah, there could be some fish stories in there. I don't have to wait to be 66. I'm not too far behind you, but I don't have to wait to appreciate match play. I think that's the best way to play. And when I have a chance to play with my friends across the year in various events, I always put the match play at the top of the pile. That is the best. I wish that was just our regular game. So I've played golf with you a few times. I have wonderful, wonderful memories of it. And one of my memories is that in all the times we've played golf, I've never seen you with a scorecard. And I think that just speaks to either your passion for finding other joys in the game, or match play, or maybe just I caught you at some moments where you did not want to have a scorecard and you appreciated the good shots and the good holes. I don't know. You'd have to defend yourself here on that one.
I know how the match stands without a scorecard.
Yeah, that's the beauty of match play. But I was going to say when you go to the UK. The question when you come off the golf course is, how did your match go? Like, no, the old saying, like, no one cares what you shot. I mean, you do not walk in off of a golf course in the UK and someone says, what did you shoot? It's assumed you're in some kind of a match. Well, let me ask you a question just about the relationship between the tour and the game, because to your point about us playing golf together, we walk. We're probably not carrying a full set of clubs. We're having a lovely time. It seems like that part of the game's doing really, really well. That part of golf of the rest of us, not professional. And do you sometimes feel like the professional game sucks the oxygen out of the golf conversation? That if we're trying to talk about golf, the influence of the tour, I mean, it is the tip of the spear. I mean, that affects golf courses. It affects equipment. It affects the cultural, conversation, the zeitgeist of golf. But my hypothesis is that golf's doing fantastic. And sometimes it just like the conversation gets imbalanced towards what's happening in professional golf. Do you agree with that? Or have you felt that that's happened more and more? What's your response to that?
What you just said, Mason, is totally consistent with what I have found. Since the pandemic, tee sheets everywhere, public courses, private courses, resort courses, membership roles at new courses, participation levels are off the charts. And maybe it gets back to the cotton candy thing we're talking about, the tweeting and the Instagram experience. There are very, very few things in life that can give us the opportunity, even if you're only going to play 9 holes on a short course. Let's say you could do that in 90 minutes. Well, 90 minutes, one-on-one with another person, and one-on-one with your own emotions and your own physical ability. And, if you're lucky enough to be able to, to walk 9 reaching holes as you and I can, it's so valuable. And there's so little in life that gives us this opportunity, be with other people, be in a natural setting and learn something about another person, learn something about yourself. They're so valuable. So it's no surprise to me that this pandemic golf boom has been a real thing. Mason, how is maybe you've talked about this in public or not, so forgive me if you haven't. But you've told me about the golf course you're developing in Texas with others, right? Can you remind me of the name of that course?
Sure. I wish I could say I'm developing, because if it was, I'd be like in the Warren Buffett tiers. No, I have a very good friend that built a golf course south of Austin called Luling, Luling. It is a beautiful property, and there's 2 golf courses there. It used to be a ranch, and you'd be surprised. People who don't spend a lot of time in Texas may not realize that some of the land is actually quite good for golf. People are realizing this now. People developing golf courses have finally figured this out here in the last 5 or 10 years. But beautiful property with a barranca system that would remind you, believe it or not, of some of the things you've seen at Riviera or at LACC or some of the courses in Southern California. So yeah, it's a beautiful. And so next time you can find your way to Texas, you could go down and check out Luling. Love to have you.
What has that process been like of finding members for the club and getting interest in the club?
It's very similar to what you were talking about with post-pandemic interest in golf. I keep thinking there is a bubble that I just think this can't continue with like you said, public and municipal tee sheets being full, private clubs being full where you can't get in, and more private clubs being built with ridiculous initiation fees. And it just keeps happening. And I think, I'm not an economist. I think someone would have to look at this and see that clearly there's still a lack of supply of golf courses, which is, people forgot that not that many years ago, they were saying golf was kind of dying, or it's like no one's playing that anymore. And it's this. And the resurgence of the game of golf in the last 5 or 6 years is incredible. And it appears to be sustainable. I think it would be hard to imagine that it just went off of a cliff tomorrow. So it's great because I think to your point about middle schoolers being exposed to golf, it's similar. I think a lot more people at all different abilities and tiers and wealth tiers are all getting access to golf. So it's a great story. So no, that is a very long answer to there is no problem getting members. And I think this is just indicative of incredible demand across all corners of golf courses.
What's the experience been like of you playing a course that you were intimately involved in helping with the development of?
It's surreal. It's difficult to enjoy it in its purest form because you remember that got moved, and you remember the drainage problem over there. you have too much information. But it's actually extremely cool. I had the chance to go out there when it was a ranch. There's nothing on it. I had the chance to take my kids out there riding their bikes on dirt piles. I had the chance to walk around. These golf architects can see these properties, and they see a golf course that you and I and other regular people could never even imagine. They see where golf holes are. They say, that will be great for a green area. And you're like, this just looks like trees to me. I don't even know what you're looking at. So it's wild. It's really, really interesting to see something like that develop from what appears to most of us nothing. But now, wait, back to you. We got to get back to you. I appreciate those questions. Thank you.
Hey, you're dealing with a trained professional here, so good luck with that, Mason.
I know you're a trained professional. I'm going to ask you one last question before we hang up, which is, and you touched on it when we were talking about some of the post-pandemic golf momentum. But when you just think about golf in general, doesn't have to be professional, whatever. Just when you think about golf looking forward, what gives you hope and optimism about the game of golf looking forward?
The thing that gives me the greatest hope and optimism looking forward in golf is that the game, as it was played in 1860s when this British Open, which I'm covering now, started, to today, has not changed at all. Even if you look at the equipment, it's changed radically. The courses, they changed significantly. But the essential goal, the still ball and the still player over it, getting an idea in his head of what he wants to try to do with it, and then taking that idea and turning into a physical act, that's the core of the game, and that has never changed. And since it's had, now a pretty significant history of being an appealing thing to do, there's absolutely no reason why it can't continue to be an appealing thing to do. And in our time, it's gone from a game of, not so welcoming to people of color or different financial backgrounds and otherwise. And now it's like everyone with a brain, I would say, is embarrassed by that period of the game. And it embraces anybody who wants to meet golf where golf is, which is a very challenging, very interesting cross-country game.
I love it. What a great full circle to where we started on your middle school introduction to the game and access. And I couldn't agree with you more. I feel very positive about it. And once we get past talking about live and talking about whether a golf ball needs to change, it's still a very beautiful thing. So, and Michael, I really appreciate it. You're so kind to make time in general, but also to do this across a bunch of time zones while you're personally and professionally enjoying Birkdale. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.
I'm delighted to do it. Thank you, Mason.
So that's it for us today. It probably won't come as a surprise to you that Michael's not very prolific on social media. So if you want to read more about him and or his writing, just Google Michael Bamberger, Bamberger, or better yet, just walk into your local bookstore and head over to the sports section. For all of Schwab's golf content, including our films, tournament news, and promotions, check out schwabgolf.com. If you've enjoyed the show, which we hope you did, we'd be really grateful if you'd leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, a rating on Spotify, or feedback wherever you listen.